Welcome to In the World of Winooski. I'm Mayor Christine Lott, and this week we had our Main Street construction project kick off again for the year, so thought it was a nice time to have an update, revisit the aspects of this critical project, and talk about what we can expect this construction season. So joining me this evening is our Director of Public Works, John Rauscher.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on to fill folks in on what we've achieved so far and what we can look forward to.
Yep.
I was hoping we could start with just an overview of the project, remind people of what we're doing and what the vision is for.
Sure. Yeah, gladly. So if you're relatively new to the project, basically what we're doing is the entire corridor of Main Street is getting reconstructed, meaning all utilities, the surface, street level, the sidewalks, trees, basically anything you see along the corridor is getting completely replaced. One of the pieces of this project that you'll see is very different is we're actually undergrounding all of the aerial utilities along the corridor. So that's going to be a new feature for this project. And what you'll see is that that's going to give us some more space for building development and aligns with some of the community vision that we heard during the early phases of the project.
Awesome. And we have a map up here.
Yep.
It's basically from just above the Rotary all the way to the town line.
Correct. So it's about 4,000 feet of roadway from just above the Rotary to Colchester. It's a Class 1 highway, meaning it's one of our more higher traffic gateway corridors. It's a 66-foot wide right-of-way, which is surprisingly, it becomes very narrow quickly when you're trying to cram all those utilities and amenities in that corridor. So that's been a big challenge for the project, I'd say. But we figured out how to get everything in that 66-foot wide corridor. We've got a couple signalized intersections, and it's a mix of residential and commercial through the corridor.
Definitely. Can you show us a little bit of what it's going to look like when it's done for folks?
Yeah, so at the end of this project, what you'll end up seeing is a road diet along the whole corridor. So currently the existing drive lanes are about 14 foot, which is pretty wide.
They're pretty wide, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wide for this corridor. So those are going to shrink down to 11 feet. There's currently parking on both sides of the corridor. Through our community outreach, we came to sort of a compromise in how we're going to be using the corridor. So parking will remain on one side of the corridor, and it'll sort of chicane up through the corridor. And on the, we're calling it the uphill climbing bike lane that heads north, there'll be a 5-foot bike lane with a 2-foot buffer. And then along with that, we're going to have much wider streetscapes. So 7-foot wide sidewalks versus the
what are they now?
4 to 5 foot. Roughly.
Oh wow! Okay.
And the we call it the amenity belt, where you have your trees, street trees, benches, things like that. That'll be 6 foot wide. So currently, I think it's like 2 feet. So not much room for bike and pedestrians currently. So this will be a big upgrade. And then, as you can see on this sort of profile. We're replacing all of those utilities as mentioned, so new water, new sanitary sewer, there'll be duct banks underneath the sidewalks for telecom and electrical, new gas lines, so much more reliable utilities. All those utilities, at least the city-owned utilities, are over 100 years old, so they're becoming very unreliable.
We've had some water main breaks in the last several years.
Yep, and it becomes very challenging on this corridor, especially with the traffic, trying to address those water main breaks. So we're thankful to have some more reliable utilities in this corridor.
A little more resiliency.
Yep.
I think we've got another view to show folks what this will look like.
Yeah, so here's just kind of a plan view so you can see what the layout is from above. Here you can kind of see that road diet in action. So. And you can see sort of that more urban streetscape that we're moving towards. We're planting roughly around 130 new trees along this corridor. So, much more shade, much more comfortable for people to use.
Definitely.
Pedestrians using it. So yeah, it'll be a major improvement over sort of the more I don't know, fast vehicle corridor that is now.
Yeah, and you can see here the bump outs for the crosswalks. I know there's a lot of pedestrian safety improvements in here.
Yeah, so currently I think we only have about 3 crosswalks for the entire corridor, mostly at the signalized intersections. Yeah. This will add, I believe, 5 additional crosswalks, including like the mid-block crossing you just saw.
Yeah.
So yeah, much more easier for folks to get, back and forth along the corridor. Some of these crossings where they're not signalized will have the rapid flash beacons.
Okay.
So just make it more visible for folks trying to cross.
So that cars see someone's trying to get over there.
Right.
And I think it's worth mentioning these improvements, these safety improvements, touch on, I think, many of the top priority areas in the Transportation Master Plan from Community Outreach.
Yeah, correct. So we have a sort of a large planning document, the Transportation Master Plan, that the community weighed in on. I believe that was, it's getting of age, maybe 2017.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so it's getting of age, and pretty much all of the top priority items were Main Street issues.
Yeah.
So this project really makes a big dent in kind of checking off those priority projects that are in that plan.
Yeah, this is a big, I would say like a really big contribution towards improved multimodal infrastructure and safety options for folks traveling in things besides cars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And I think you have an intriguing view related to utilities here.
Yeah, so one thing on the DPW public works side we're really excited about is, as mentioned, getting rid of some of these really old, kind of ticking time bomb utilities that are in the corridor. So this is just a plan view showing all of the proposed underground utilities and sort of the different colors here. For example, like green is our stormwater. You can see our water line kind of runs down the middle. There's electric and gas. Conduits are kind of on the perimeter. So yeah, we're really excited about just kind of not having to worry about this corridor, having reliable utilities, inviting folks to come in and develop and being able to connect to those utilities. But yeah, and as you can see, we've got a picture of, this was last season's construction, where they're starting to lay some of those conduits for the electrical and telecom work. So yeah, that's it's a big part of the project that nobody's going to see at the end of the day, but it's a large investment that we're definitely everyone's going to get the fruits of that labor, through reliable utilities and resiliency and not having to worry about, future water main breaks and disrupting people's lives and traffic. So yeah, that's kind of the big part of last season's construction, was getting that work pretty much underway.
Yeah, and you mentioned resiliency. I know, like, for Green Mountain Power, this protects like power lines. Talked about the water main breaks. We've got these new trees coming in. There's some climate resiliency there. There's so many components of this project that are touching on climate resiliency, multimodal infrastructure, safety, and then also I understand the utility undergrounding supports that development that we've been planning for along Main Street as we continue to try to bring more of the housing that folks need to Winooski.
Absolutely, yeah. So this project really started, I think, back in 2017 with a large planning effort. And it was really looking at the new form-based code development. So, as you know, you go up the corridor and you see some of these large buildings that sit pretty close to the property lines. So this project is really trying to right-size the corridor for that new development type and like the needs of the community through, pedestrian bike improvements and the resiliency piece.
Many, many facets. And so who is working on this for the city of Winooski?
Yeah, so we've got a big team on this one. It's a big project, so a big team. Our contractor is Kubricki Joint to Lime. They're the main contractor overseeing all the work out there. And then you can kind of see on the third row that that's most of our design group. So VHB is our lead engineering consultant on this project. They have some sub-consultants. We also have WSP, who is our outreach consultant on this project. They're primarily funded from VTrans because of, there's a future project on the north of the city, the DDI project. So they're the outreach folks on that team, and it made sense to kind of bring them on our team so there wasn't mixed messages, or, we weren't, we make sure
we got to be coordinated.
And obviously people have a, limited bandwidth of so much stuff coming at them. So this is a way to kind of simplify, any impacts. So
that's great.
And then we've got a huge group of financial stakeholders through U.S. Rural Development, which is our primary funding agency on this project, along with some of the other VTrans Northern Border folks on here. So it takes a lot of funding to make these projects work.
Absolutely.
And then on the bottom is our kind of our stakeholders, private utility stakeholders. Obviously, this is one of the big components of this project is that undergrounding piece. So we've been working with, Vermont Gas, Green Mountain Power, the telecom agencies for a few years now, just getting ready, and we're finally getting to that work next season. So
to put those in.
Yep.
Speaking of the project budget, why don't you tell folks how are we doing with that?
Yeah, so we've gone through one season of construction. We're completely within budget and where we expected to be at this point. So
great.
Yeah, no major cost overruns, so that's great news. And overall, the project sits around $28.2 million, and that's all in. So that's design, that's construction, outreach, purchasing easements, total cost. So, and that is, that is offset by a lot of the grant funding that we received through our financing. But back in 2018, we did get a $23 million bond vote approval to go after this project, and we were able to stay within that financing amount. So our construction contracts are around $22 million. So we're in a pretty good place right now financing wise, and a lot of that, as you can see here, is through the grant funding that we were able to procure. Most of that's through USDA financing. But you can kind of see here, this table shows sort of our funding sources that we keep track of. There's a lot. This is, it takes a lot of funding sources to make these projects work on the municipal side. So, just overall for, it is broken into sort of general fund costs, which is our transportation piece, and then sewer fund, water fund components. So you can
and those are connected to our utility bills.
Exactly. So you can kind of see what that breakdown is. That's all included, as you know, in our capital planning efforts that we do every year through the budget process. So overall, surprisingly, our 2018 modeling when we went out to bond is still holding.
That is a wonderful surprise.
Yeah. And a lot of that's buffered by some of the grant funding, thankfully.
Yeah. And I did want to call out that part of how we've been able to reduce the impact of the cost of this to taxpayers is because we were able to use new revenue generated by the redevelopment in the downtown when we paid off that TIF debt. So that's, for folks who've been around a long time in Winooski, that investment was always hoped to be to kind of offset the costs of maintaining the city. And here we are able to do some significant improvements in a big part of the city with that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we're not projecting any, as we're building the capital plans that ultimately council reviews, we're not projecting any property tax rate increases that are going to be required going forward for this project. That's already
baked in.
Yeah.
So let's, why don't you tell us what's been completed so far, and then we'll turn to what are we looking at this year?
Sure. So last season was our first season of construction. So that was primarily focused on deep utility work. So sanitary sewers are deepest utility, and water main next. So most of the work last year was starting from the south end of the corridor and moving north with sanitary sewer and water work.
Okay.
That includes all the service connections that go up through the corridor. I think there's around 60 properties that we're making those new tie-ins with. And towards the end of last season, we started to get into street reconstruction. So south of Spring Street, you'll start to see some of that street reconstruction work in place. So yeah, primarily last year was obviously very disruptive because we're deep excavation, completely tearing up the road, usually right in the center of the road. So it was a disruptive year, but upcoming for this season, we've got a little bit of water sewer work left on the very north end of the corridor that they started this week. And then probably around the end of April, they're going to come back to the south end of the corridor and start working their way north again with stormwater utilities, which are a bit shallower. They're kind of on the perimeter of the curb line. And then telecom duct banks will start to run up the corridor after that stormwater's in. So, and then once those utilities are in, then you'll start seeing the street reconstruction kind of happen too, following it. So, yeah, so it should be a little bit less disruptive than last year because we're a little bit shallower. We're kind of more on the perimeter. We do have crossings that we have to perform with some of the stormwater and telecom duct banks, but folks will start seeing what it's going to look like as we get closer to the end of the summer.
Well, that would be exciting.
Yeah.
I know I saw some comments of folks who weren't in the know, like, oh, this pavement job is terrible.
Yeah.
It's just temporary. There's definitely something better coming.
Yeah, that pavement that was north of Spring Street, that was really just meant for our plowing operations in the winter. It was temporary. There's no compacted base behind it. So we were just hoping to get it through the winter and that'll get all ripped
We'll have to
up.
rip it all up again for this. Right. Yep. That's right. What can travelers expect in terms of like traffic impacts? We're going down to one lane again for a period of time, I imagine.
Right. Yeah. So it will look similar to last season if you traveled the corridor. So about the end of April, the contractor's targeting to put the northbound detour back in. So it's one lane northbound up Main Street again, and then anyone southbound will be directed towards Weaver Street. Weaver will be 2-lane again, but Weaver Street will be the primary detour again. So, yeah, and then for folks that live on the corridor, similar to last year, some of I've highlighted on here some of the impacts they'll likely see. So again, parking, on-street parking is always an impact. We try to accommodate when we can to allow on-street parking through the corridor. Getting in and out of driveways is probably going to be a larger impact this season because good news is we'll be starting to put in sidewalks. Bad news is we're putting in sidewalks. So, that concrete has to cure. It's going to block driveways. So we will be coordinating with those property owners ahead of time, just letting them know, hey, we're going to be in front of your property the next day or two. Might want to park on the street. So that's kind of coordination we'll have this season with owners. Luckily, you won't see those water turnoffs and disruptions or sanitary sewer disruptions because that's all done.
That's great news.
But you will see private utility impacts. So, Vermont Gas, for example, or GMP, those utilities will be coming in. So.
And does this project team manage that communication, or do those utilities providers do it themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the utility providers have their own notification system. However, we all meet weekly through our regular construction meetings with all stakeholders. So we're pretty well coordinated with them. We know where they're going to be. They know where we're going to be. And so we do work really closely with them.
That's great. Let's let folks know how they can stay in touch, stay up to date on what's coming up, or reach out if they've got questions, concerns.
Yeah. So we do have a pretty robust outreach plan thanks to WSP and VTrans. So The best way to keep in touch, and I'll show you on the next slide, is we do have a weekly construction notice. So sign up for that, and then we will keep you updated on all things happening during the week. We send that out on Friday. You can find that on Front Porch Forum. You can find it through, if you sign up for the email. If you're on the corridor, we do a lot of door-to-door outreach, so we'll hang flyers if we're disrupting any services or, like I said, driveways before. Our project website has all of this information too, so you can find our weekly updates there. I'll go to this next slide and show you some of the info. So we also have a 24-hour hotline. So
oh, wow.
WSP, our consultant, is on the other end of that. So if you do have like something urgent, feel free to call that line, and they'll figure out who to get in touch with, whether it be the city, whether it be the contractor. We also have the emails that you can directly reach out to. So info@winooskimainstreet.com. That will go to WSP as a start, as you can kind of see here on this flow chart. And then they distribute it to the appropriate party. So whether it be the engineer, the city, the contractor, and then they track that, and then we meet weekly to talk about any outreach issues. So we're all kind of in the loop, but WSP is the first kind of line of defense to figure out where it goes.
Coordinate that.
Yep.
Yeah, I know I heard last year from a couple of residents who they had concerns, they shared those, and the team seemed quite responsive in getting back to them.
Great, yeah.
Well, the last thing that's important to touch on is this is a huge commercial corridor for the city, and we want folks to know that businesses remain open throughout this construction. Can you tell us what parking looks like for folks who are trying to patronize businesses on Main Street?
Yeah, so parking is fluid, I'll say, with the construction, because the detour changes. There will be signage that shows where restricted parking is, but if there's no signage, it's available for parking. Obviously, through this corridor, there's those buildings with form-based code. There's usually parking in the back, and we will work with those owners to try to promote some signage. We have a marketing team on board now to try to help with doing some wayfinding for parking and just notifying businesses are open. We're coordinating some marketing signage with them right now, actually, that we're hoping to have on the corridor here this spring to help with that. But yeah, there's a lot of really great businesses on this corridor shown on here. Please go visit them. A lot of great food choices. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that. And
and what are the typical construction hours and days?
Yeah, so Monday through Friday, typically, the crews works, 7 till 4 typically.
Okay.
Unless they get into some trouble, and then they have to work longer. But typically it's Monday through Friday. There may be periods of night work if it's due to traffic, to accommodate traffic. So, for example, if we have to close down Tigan Street and it's feasible, we'll do night work there. And there may be some crossings that along the corridor where it's more conducive to do night work, but primarily daytime, Monday through Friday, 7 till 4.
So nights and weekends won't be as challenging if you're concerned. Still a construction zone, but not active for the most part.
Yep.
Just again, we have a lot of great businesses. Their revenue was definitely impacted last season, and certainly will be again. So if you love Winooski, you want to see these, still have these options in the future, please keep your local businesses in mind this construction season. And we expect to have a little bit better signage as it relates to parking. Yep. I think maybe folks last year might not have known if you could park on the street, and you can, just there will be signs about certain locations you cannot.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, a lot of these buildings, the ones that are closer to the street, they have parking out back if folks weren't aware of that. So definitely not a reason to avoid Winooski.
Absolutely.
And delays, I did hear last year for the most part, were pretty short. Traffic delays?
Yeah, pretty much. It gets a little backed up when contractors have to move materials and things, but for the most part, we track that, and there are conditions in the contract that we cannot cause traffic delays beyond a certain time frame. So, yeah, overall, last year went better than we actually model it. We model what the delays could look like, and surprisingly, it was better than we anticipated. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so far so good.
Well, great. I'm really excited for all that this project will bring us in the future once we get through. Construction is never a fun time, but it's great to hear the impact will be a little bit different this year, maybe a little less significant. There's a little more opportunity to try to navigate through the area. And just want to remind folks for all the information to visit www.winooskivt.gov/Main Street. If you have questions, concerns, things you want to share with the project team, you can call, send an email. There's also a form where you can sign up to get updates. And if you do live on the corridor or own a business, make sure that you use the form online to submit your contact information if you haven't yet, so you can be directly contacted if you're going to be impacted.
Great. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in to give us an update, John. Looking forward to seeing the end of the summer, what it's going to look like out there.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us for In the World of Winooski.